In October and November of 2019, the United States House of Representatives conducted an impeachment inquiry into President Donald Trump centered on Ukraine policy and a July telephone call between President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. During this inquiry, questions emerged regarding the role of a National Security Council official named Kash Patel, commonly known as Kash Patel. This narrative examines the publicly reported congressional testimony and discussions surrounding Patel's position at the NSC and allegations about his involvement in Ukraine-related matters. Based entirely on official transcripts, public statements, and documented media reports from that period. Kash Patel's path to the White House began with his legal education at Pace University School of Law and work as a public defender in Florida before transitioning to national security work. According to publicly available information, he served as a federal prosecutor in the National Security Division of the Department of Justice, handling terrorism and international criminal cases. In 2017, Patel joined the staff of Representative Devin Nunes, chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, where he became deeply involved in the committee's investigation into the FBI's Russia probe. According to public reports, Patel played a significant role in drafting what became known as the Nunes Memo, a February 2018 document that criticized the FBI's use of Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act warrants. This work brought Patel into circles close to President Trump and established his reputation among congressional Republicans as someone willing to challenge intelligence agency actions. Kash Patel joined the White House National Security Council in February 2019. According to public records, his official role was as a senior director focused on counterterrorism issues. In July 2019, according to official announcements, Patel was formally appointed as Senior Director of the Counterterrorism Directorate at the NSC, a position distinct from the directorate's handling European affairs and Ukraine policy. The NSC staff is organized into regional and functional portfolios, with officials typically working within their designated areas and maintaining clear lines of responsibility for different geographic regions and policy areas. The impeachment inquiry that brought questions about Patel's role in a public view centered on events during spring and summer 2019. The investigation focused on the July 25, 2019 telephone call between President Trump and President Zelensky, during which Trump asked Zelensky to investigate former Vice President Joe Biden and his son Hunter Biden. The inquiry examined whether President Trump had withheld nearly $400 million in military aid to Ukraine as leverage to pressure investigations that could benefit Trump politically. The investigation also looked at the role of Rudy Giuliani, President Trump's personal attorney, who had been conducting parallel diplomatic efforts in Ukraine outside official State Department channels. As part of the investigation, the House Intelligence Committee, led by Chairman Adam Schiff, conducted closed-door depositions with current and former national security and diplomatic officials during October and November 2019. Among the witnesses was Dr. Fiona Hill, who testified on October 14, 2019. Hill had served as Senior Director for Europe and Russia at the National Security Council from April 2017 until July 2019, giving her direct responsibility for Ukraine policy within the NSC structure. Hill was a highly regarded foreign policy expert with a doctoral degree from Harvard University and extensive experience studying Russian politics and European affairs. According to the official transcript of Hill's testimony, which was later released publicly, she raised concerns about Kash Patel's possible involvement in Ukraine matters. Hill testified that before she left the NSC in July, she had learned from a brief interaction with a member of the executive secretary's staff that President Trump had wanted to discuss Ukraine-related materials. Hill stated that during this interaction, the staffer mentioned reaching out to Kash Patel regarding these materials rather than to Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, who held the official Ukraine portfolio on the NSC. Hill testified this led her to believe President Trump might have thought Patel, rather than Vindman, was in charge of Ukraine policy at the NSC. She stated this concerned her because it suggested an irregular channel of information to the president about Ukraine that operated outside normal NSC structure. Hill testified that after learning this information, she reported her concerns to Charles Kupperman, Deputy National Security Advisor. According to her testimony, she expressed that she believed there might be alternative channels of information reaching the president about Ukraine. Hill stated that Kupperman indicated he would look into the matter, but she testified she never learned the outcome. When questioned about the extent of her knowledge regarding Patel's alleged communications with President Trump, Hill acknowledged significant limitations. According to the transcript, when asked whether she had seen materials Patel allegedly provided to Trump, Hill stated clearly that she had not. When asked if she knew what kind of materials were discussed, she testified she did not have knowledge of specific content. Hill indicated her concerns were based primarily on the brief interaction with the executive secretary's staff member rather than on direct evidence of Patel's communications with the president. The questioning during Hill's deposition revealed the evidentiary limitations of her testimony. Committee members asked repeatedly about the basis for her concerns and what direct evidence she possessed. Hill was forthcoming in acknowledging she did not have first-hand knowledge of conversations between Patel and President Trump, had not witnessed Patel briefing the president on Ukraine matters, and that her understanding was based on inference and second-hand information rather than direct observation. On October 29, 2019, Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman testified before the same House committees. Vindman, a decorated Army officer and Iraq War veteran who had been awarded a Purple Heart, served as Director for European Affairs at the National Security Council with direct responsibility for Ukraine policy. According to the official transcript, Vindman addressed questions about Kash Patel's role. Vindman testified that Fiona Hill had informed him that Patel was allegedly misrepresenting himself as a Ukraine expert and that President Trump had come to believe Patel was the NSC official handling Ukraine policy. Vindman's testimony about Patel was explicitly based on what Hill had told him rather than on his own direct observations. When questioned about whether he had personal knowledge of Patel providing information to President Trump about Ukraine, Vindman testified he did not have such direct knowledge. The House Intelligence Committee's final impeachment inquiry report, published in December 2019, included documentary evidence that added another dimension. The report contained telephone records obtained through subpoenas showing a 25-minute telephone call between Rudy Giuliani and Kash Patel on May 10, 2019. The report noted this call occurred during a period when Giuliani was actively engaged in Ukraine-related efforts. The phone records showed that shortly before Giuliani's call with Patel, Giuliani had spoken with the White House switchboard, and shortly after, Giuliani had subsequent conversations with Lev Parnas, a Ukrainian-American businessman assisting Giuliani, who was later indicted on federal campaign finance charges. The report included this call record, but did not draw specific conclusions about the content or purpose of the conversation. Following media reports about congressional testimony regarding his alleged role, Kash Patel issued a public statement on November 8, 2019, categorically denying the allegations. According to his statement reported by multiple news outlets, Patel declared that at no time had he communicated to President Trump or any other White House official any information about Ukraine. He stated that any reporting suggesting he had discussed Ukraine matters with the president was completely false and that any staff members suggesting otherwise were either misinformed or deliberately spreading falsehoods. Patel emphasized his record as a national security professional and expressed his view that the allegations were unfounded and damaging to his reputation. In December 2019, Patel gave an interview to CBS News addressing the May 10, 2019 telephone call, with Giuliani documented in the phone records. According to the CBS News report, Patel stated the call was personal in nature. He explained that Giuliani had been mayor of New York City when Patel was growing up in the area, suggesting this personal connection provided context for their conversation. Patel maintained the call did not involve work Giuliani was conducting for President Trump regarding Ukraine or any Ukraine-related matters. On November 18, 2019, Kash Patel filed a $25 million defamation lawsuit against Politico and reporter Natasha Bertrand in federal court. According to the lawsuit, Patel argued that articles published on October 23 and October 30, 2019 had falsely portrayed him as having fed negative information about Ukraine to President Trump outside official channels and as having misrepresented himself as a Ukraine policy expert. The complaint alleged the defendants knew or should have known the allegations were false. The lawsuit argued that neither Hill nor Vindman had presented direct evidence that Patel actually briefed President Trump on Ukraine matters, yet articles had reported these allegations as established facts. Patel filed a second lawsuit around the same time against the New York Times, seeking $44 million in damages over similar coverage. When full transcripts of Hill's testimony were released publicly in November 2019, legal analysts and journalists examined whether the testimony, in complete context, fully supported earlier media characterizations. Hill's transcript revealed she had repeatedly acknowledged not having direct knowledge of Patel providing materials to Trump or of their communications. Some observers noted the testimony, when examined in entirety, revealed more uncertainty than some initial media reports had suggested. This became part of partisan debate, with Republicans arguing allegations were based on speculation rather than hard evidence, while Democrats maintained the pattern of testimony and circumstantial evidence raised legitimate questions. The House Intelligence Committee, through a spokesperson, defended the significance of Hill's testimony. According to statements to media outlets, committee staff indicated Hill had testified she was informed Patel was providing information to the president on Ukraine as part of an alternate channel, and they noted the documented May 10th telephone call between Patel and Giuliani occurred during the time frame when Hill said she had raised concerns internally. The spokesperson stated that if the White House possessed evidence that would contradict allegations about Patel's role, they should have provided such materials instead of refusing to comply with congressional subpoenas. During public impeachment hearings in November 2019, Fiona Hill appeared as a witness on November 21, 2019. According to the official transcript, Daniel Goldman, senior counsel for the House Intelligence Committee Democrats, questioned Hill about Patel's role. Goldman asked Hill to confirm that Patel did not work on Ukraine matters within the NSC structure she oversaw. Hill confirmed this was correct. Goldman then asked whether there had been indications that Patel had been providing information directly to President Trump about Ukraine. Hill responded affirmatively, stating this seemed to be the indication, though she clarified her understanding was based on what she had been told by other officials and what she had read in news articles, rather than on direct personal knowledge. The public discussion surrounding Patel's alleged role became intertwined with broader partisan divide over the impeachment inquiry. Democratic members pointed to testimony about Patel and the documented phone call as evidence of irregular channels of communication operating outside normal diplomatic and national security processes. They argued this demonstrated a pattern of circumventing career professionals. Republican members characterized the testimony as based on hearsay and speculation rather than direct evidence. They noted both Hill and Vindman had acknowledged lacking direct knowledge of Patel's conversations with President Trump and that Patel had categorically denied such communications. They pointed out that no transcript, recording, document, or first-hand witness had been presented to corroborate that such communications occurred. The factual question of whether Kash Patel actually communicated with President Trump about Ukraine remained unresolved by definitive evidence presented during the impeachment inquiry. Patel's consistent denials formed one part of the record. The testimony of Hill and Vindman, with acknowledged limitations regarding direct knowledge, formed another part. The documented telephone call between Patel and Giuliani was a matter of record, but the content was not established. No documents, emails, or text messages between Patel and President Trump regarding Ukraine were produced. No witnesses testified they had directly observed Patel briefing President Trump on Ukraine. The House voted to impeach President Trump in December 2019 on 2 articles. The articles did not specifically reference Kash Patel, focusing instead on President Trump's conduct during the July 25th call and the withholding of military aid. The Senate conducted a trial in January and February 2020, and on February 5, 2020, voted to acquit President Trump on both articles. After the impeachment proceedings concluded, Kash Patel continued serving in significant positions. In February 2020, he was appointed senior advisor to Richard Grenell acting director of national intelligence. Later in 2020, following President Trump's dismissal of Secretary of Defense Mark Esper, Patel was named Chief of Staff to Acting Secretary of Defense Christopher Miller. Regarding the defamation lawsuits Patel filed in November 2019, according to subsequent legal news reports in 2021, the litigation did not proceed to trial. News reports indicated Patel's attorneys moved to voluntarily dismiss both lawsuits. According to reporting about the Politico case, lawyers representing Politico suggested in court filings that the judge appeared prepared to dismiss the lawsuit on legal grounds. The lawsuits were withdrawn without a determination on the merits of Patel's claims or examination of underlying factual questions through trial. The events surrounding Kash Patel's role during the 2019 Ukraine impeachment inquiry became part of the permanent public record of that congressional investigation. The House Intelligence Committee's report included references to questions and testimony about Patel's involvement, though it did not present conclusive evidence of his communications with President Trump about Ukraine. The Senate's acquittal brought the formal impeachment process to a close, but questions raised during the inquiry remained subjects of ongoing political discussion and partisan interpretation. The congressional discussions involving Kash Patel became part of public discourse because they touched on questions about national security decision-making processes, the proper functioning of the National Security Council, and how foreign policy is conducted. While direct documentary evidence of Patel's alleged communications with President Trump about Ukraine was not established through congressional testimony, the fact that senior NSC officials raised concerns that phone records documented contact between Patel and Giuliani during the relevant period, and that these matters were examined during a presidential impeachment inquiry ensured these questions became part of the documented historical record of that investigation and the broader political events of 2019 and 2020.